Good morning. Today we are continuing on in our unit about data management, and specifically we are going to talk about sampling methods today. So when you do a survey is a way of collecting information about a particular population or group of people. There are two different groups that you can survey. So you could either survey the census, which is everyone that's in that population, or you can take a sample of that group. Okay, so what I mean by population is all individuals that belong to the group that's being studied. So, for example, it could be all grade 11 college math students would be a population, but a sample of that population is just a group that is representative of that population. So, for example, that would be like all grade 11 college math students in our class. Okay, so our class would be a sample that could be representative of the entire population of grade 11 math students. Okay, so there are different ways that you can create those sample groups. Okay, how to choose the people that are being surveyed. Okay, so today we're going to talk about 5 or 6. I've got a chart here, and I think I've given you a blank one that you can fill in if you would like. Okay, so selecting a sample is one of the most important parts of survey design. A carefully selected sample of 1,000 people can be used to represent the Canadian population as long as the sample is representative of the population. Right? So it can save you a lot of time in collecting information. So if you want to know about the entire Canadian population, if you carefully select your 1,000 people, they can still be representative of the entire population without you actually having to survey the entire population. Okay? A sample is said to be representative if it contains the same characteristics in the small population. Right? So if you've chosen the people in the small population that are representative of the larger one, it's just as good. Okay, the sample also has to be random so that every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Okay, so we're going to talk about, I think there are 5, maybe 6 different sampling methods. I'll give you an example of what they are and then kind of the pros and cons to each one. Okay, and then I've got a few practice questions for you. So the first one is simple random sampling. So this means that all selections are equally likely, so everyone is equally likely to be selected, and it's actually considered to be the most reliable of our sampling techniques. So for example, if you, calm down, put all 30 names from the class in a hat, we don't have 30 anymore, we have 24. So if we put all 24 names from the class in a hat and we randomly drew out 5 names and surveyed those 5 people, right? Everyone has a chance of being selected, right? All those chances are equally as likely because your names are all in the hat, but the 5 that we draw out is very random, okay? A pro to that is that it's typically quite a fair representation of the population. And it's also really easy to do, right? Putting names in a hat, pretty easy to do. I'm struggling with I want to get rid of it, delete. Why can't I delete it? Anyway, a con though is that it might not be representative. So if perhaps we chose 5 names and they were all really close friends and they shared the same opinions, that might not be representative, right? But it would be random. Okay, the next example is stratified. So this one's a little bit more complicated, but it's that the population is divided into groups, and then a random sample is taken from each of the groups. Okay, so the sample from each group is proportional to the size of the group. Okay, so school is the easiest example here, right? The school is divided into 4 grades, those 4 groups, okay? So if there are 300 grade 9s, 350 grade 10s, 320 grade 11s, and 270 grade 12s, so we've divided into the 4 groups within the population of a school, and then we survey the same percentage of each group. So if we're surveying 10% of each group, that means that we would survey 30 grade 9s, 35 grade 10s, 32 grade 11s, and 27 grade 12s, and that would be representative of the entire population, right? The percentage is the same for each grade, even though the number in each grade is not the same. Okay, some pros to that is that it is also a fair representation of the population, right? We are surveying the same amount or the same percentage of each group, okay? It does take a lot more time and work on the surveyor's part, right, to figure out how many of each group needs to be surveyed. And just like all of them, really, it can be biased, right? So maybe grade 11s and 12s have a stronger opinion if we're doing a survey about getting your driving permit, right? So it would just depend on what you are surveying the population about. Okay, the next one is cluster sampling. Okay, so this again, the population is divided into groups. Okay, and then a random number of groups is chosen, and it could just be one of the groups, and then all members within that chosen group are surveyed. So my example for this one is that if the vice principal enters the cafeteria and randomly selects 2 tables in the caf, and then all students at those 2 tables are surveyed. Okay, so it's not a certain percentage of each table like stratified was, it's all of the table and however many that they randomly choose. Okay? This one is easier to do for sure, right? But again, it can often over or underrepresent some opinions, right? So you typically sit with your friends in the cafeteria, so it might overrepresent one group and underrepresent somebody else, right? So people that sit together typically share opinions on things, okay? Another one is convenience sampling. So for this, a selection from the population is taken based on availability. So it's kind of like whoever's around. Okay, so if we want opinions on food selection in the cafeteria, we ask people at several tables in the caf, right? It's convenient, they're right there. We don't have to go outside of the cafeteria, and we can get our survey done. It's a good way if you wanted to start your research on a specific idea, right? I mean, people sitting in the caf typically buy cafeteria food, right? So it's a good way to start, but you're also not necessarily reaching the entire population, right? So people that weren't in the cafeteria would not get surveyed, and maybe they would have opinions on the food selection in the cafeteria as well. Okay, but it's definitely easy to do because it's convenient, right? So everyone's kind of right there. Next is volunteer. So it's asking people to participate in your survey. So oftentimes at university, and especially at Trent, they do a thing in Psych 101 where you're given an extra 2% at the end of the year if you volunteer in the upper year surveys or studies. Okay, so you can get an extra 2% if you volunteer for a study. It's another one is Canadian Idol, right? You volunteer to go on to the show. Okay. It's often used for psychological or pharmaceutical trials. So, you know, if you would like to be a part of this, like, come on out, right? Which can be easy for the people running the survey, right? They just have to wait for people to apply or to participate. But again, people can sometimes either be surveyed more than once. It can be biased, right? People who tend to have strong opinions might be the ones volunteering, right? Which might not be representative of your population. Okay, there's one more, and I'm going to add it down here. And it's not going to look good, and it's going to be okay. So the type of sampling is systematic. Okay, so you shouldn't have to listen to my explanation. So systematic sampling is where every nth person is surveyed. Okay, so what I mean by nth person, so my example here would be every 10th name on a list. Okay, and so maybe we starting at name 4. Okay, so then it would go 4, 14, 24, and you would survey that group. Okay, let's see, we're going off the page here. Okay, so it's every 10th person, every 15th person. You would just kind of look at the number or the list of people that is in your population and decide how many people you want to survey. A pro for this, it is pretty easy to do, right? Every 10th person is not a difficult task. You just count down, right? But just like all of them, it can be biased, right? It can be misrepresentative of the population. Maybe every 10th person are friends and they all have the same opinions about something. Okay, so sorry, I just wanted to add that one at the end, is systematic. I forgot that in the chart. Okay, so now I'm going to have you do some practice questions, okay, that I will post about deciding which sampling technique is best.